Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Jeff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derek.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC. All right, everyone. We have a hopefully shortish sidebar for you today. You got Jeff and Derek.
Hello.
I'd say we didn't invite Mike, but we always invite Mike. He just chooses when and when not to show.
Yeah.
So we have a correction we want to make because we do feel like occasionally we need to let you know when we screw stuff up. We got some pieces of listener feedback, and then we're going to introduce next week's episode. And of course, first things first, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I kind of forget that this is coming out
literally
on Thanksgiving.
That's right. Happy Thanksgiving, Derek.
Happy Thanksgiving to the listeners, to you, Jeff, to everybody except the Canadians because they've already had it, I guess.
Right, sure.
Those people.
And I'll just say right now, I'm thankful to our editors.
Yeah, it's the only reason we have a podcast.
Yep.
is my sister and Anthony because Jeff was not going to keep going unless we had someone else. So here we are. All right, Jeff, you take it away. Correction time.
Yeah, just a quick correction. In our episode on The Good Place, during our discussion of the dress bitch incident, we said that Eleanor pointed the finger at the dry cleaners when Madison discovered that her dress had been torn. In fact, she did not. Madison just jumped right to blaming the dry cleaner, and Eleanor didn't really do anything to disabuse her of that notion. Regardless, Eleanor did not herself defame the dry cleaner. So I wanted to get that out now rather than and avoid any comments down the road.
We're going to have so many listeners banging outside.
Our listeners are very detail oriented, Derek.
I would hope so. In fact, I'm very disappointed that it's been 5 days since the episode come out and they haven't yet, already made like 30 comments saying that we screwed it up. So, but all right, fair enough. We're next going to jump into listener feedback. So thank you to a few people who have given us some feedback. The first one comes from Kevin Goldberg, friend of the podcast, very good friend of mine, and I'm going to guess a likely future guest host. He and I have gone back and forth on what he might be guest hosting on, so I hope to see him in the future. Kevin is the vice president and First Amendment expert over at Freedom Forum. Freedom Forum is a nonprofit that basically is dedicated to fostering First Amendment freedoms for everybody. For those of you who ever visited the Newseum in Washington, D.C. until it closed in 2019, Freedom Forum was responsible for the operations of that very interesting museum. I know Julie and I came multiple times, and we were very sad when it closed down. But yeah, so that was Freedom Forum. Kevin is one of the people in the world who's like Mike, who loves King of the Hill, which I've only discovered because of our conversations regarding the podcast. And apparently he finally caught up on watching some of the newest season of the show, listened to our episode on King of the Hill season 14, which released back in August. And he actually reached out to me and sent me an email about the episode, about the part of the episode where we discussed being sued for leaving a bad online review, if you could or couldn't be. Not shockingly, Kevin, in fact, had co-authored a piece on that exact issue on Freedom Forum's website, which I shouldn't be shocked by. They do a lot of fun little First Amendment things. I will say, having had a chance to re-listen to our commentary after reviewing some of the literature on his website, I do think we did a pretty decent job, even if we did gloss over it quickly. The one thing we did not talk about, which I do think is important, is acknowledging that there is, in fact, a law in the books that was passed back in 2016, took effect in 2017, called the U.S. Consumer Review Fairness Act, the CRFA, which essentially says that companies cannot use like form contracts, like the click-through agreements that sometimes we just click and don't even think what the terms and conditions are, that includes provisions that would prevent customers from reviewing a company's goods or services, or allow the company to penalize a customer for giving a bad review, or require a customer to give up the ownership of, something when writing a review about the company. And I think that's important to note. We didn't really talk much about the law in that area. We basically just said it's a First Amendment thing. As long as you're not lying, you really can't be. Nothing bad can happen to you. That isn't to say that the law still can't allow companies to go after customers who give defamatory, either defamatory, there are false and misleading reviews, or they're harassing, abusive, vulgar, things along that nature. Yes, Jeffrey.
I want to point out that when we say nothing bad can happen to you, the companies can't bring you to court over those kinds of things. They could refuse to serve you in the future or something like that. That is entirely something they can do. Private companies are not bound by the First Amendment, but the courts are. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
No, fair enough, and that's completely fair. If you give a private business a bad review, they're entitled to say you don't need to come back to our establishment. That is, they're more as long as they're not doing it for an improper purpose, improper purpose being like a civil rights violation or something like that. They can certainly do that, but more importantly, you can't. They could bring a suit. Nothing's going to happen from it. I mean, or at least it's going to be kicked out pretty quickly. And in fact, from the Federal Trade Commission's own website, it is specific that, the law says it's okay to prohibit or remove a review if it contains confidential private information, is libelous, obscene, vulgar, sexually explicit, something along those lines, is not related to what the company's products or services do. I think of a great example of Four Seasons, when there was some very interesting reviews on the Four Seasons landscaping website that has nothing to do with what Four Seasons landscaping did or didn't do. Another good example is very recently, one of my favorite hockey teams, New Jersey Devils. I'm going to apologize to some of you who probably hate them, but nevertheless, one of their star forwards recently hurt himself at a restaurant. Apparently, he hurt himself on the glass or something, on some glass broke, and it injured him to a point where he's out for a couple months.
Oh, wow.
The reviews on that restaurant did not go great for a few days from all the Devils fans because, insert reason here.
Sure.
And of course, they got flooded, and then all those got taken down over the course of time. And again, they're allowed to take them down if it has nothing to do with what actually the company does. So anyway, wanted to bring that up, and I will link in our show notes to some of the stuff on the Freedom Forum's website, which I do think is really interesting. And I highly recommend you check it out because Kevin does do some great stuff over there, as well as the overall organization. Next comment came from another friend of the podcast who, after listening to our most recent episode in The Good Place, texted me the following. So wait, how long would Pillboy have been in jail for because of the Mexican restaurant robbery due to Jason being a moron? The answer is pretty clearly life without parole. If they had gone all the way through trial and proved that Pillboy and Jason tried to rob the Mexican restaurant in arguably the dumbest way possible. I mean, I'm still not sure how you bringing a safe into a restaurant would ever work, but let's ignore that. The short answer is because Jason was killed during the commission of a felony, life without parole. That's what it is. And I know this because we literally have a case example of real life that's somehow not terribly dissimilar to this. So we've talked about the felony murder rule a couple times on the podcast. I'm going to talk specifically about the one in Florida because Jason and Pillboy are in Florida, and the case study is in Florida. So,
shocking.
In Florida, the felony murder rule holds that. It wasn't Jacksonville. I'm trying to remember where it was. I want to say it was Pensacola.
Okay.
But Florida generally, the felony murder rule holds that an accomplice can be convicted of first-degree murder if a death occurs during the commission of a dangerous felony, regardless of who caused the death or whether the accomplice was present at the time. And so this almost creates a strict liability situation where prosecution does not have to prove intent to kill They do not. They just need to prove participation in a felony. And I think there's a list of felonies: robbery, burglary, arson, kidnapping, and carjacking. And it results in a death. And it doesn't matter how it results in a death, as long as it results in a death from, the commission of the felony. And they can face the same penalties as like the person who actually killed the person.
Okay.
So there's a case back in 2003. There's a guy who was 20 years old. His name was Ryan Holle, Holle. I believe that's how you pronounce it. After a night of partying, he lent his car keys to a friend who, along with 3 other men, used the vehicle to drive to a home to steal a safe containing drugs and money. While they were doing it, they found a shotgun and apparently either shot or beat the 18-year-old resident to death. All this happened while Ryan was a mile and a half away and possibly even asleep at the time. And he was charged with first-degree murder under the felony murder rule. Prosecutors very straightforwardly argued that if there was no car, there wouldn't have been a murder. And there is indication that he was aware that the men were planning a burglary, which was the key evidence.
Okay.
I'm actually not even sure if they need to show that, to be honest, based on how broad of a definition I just gave. But the fact that they had it already make sort of really is the linchpin there.
Yeah.
And I'll get into a second why it might not be. But anyway, he was convicted, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And there was the same sentence that was given to the guy who confessed to killing her and the other participants who were part of the robbery. His case, and I want to say this was probably may have been, so that was 2003. I want to say it was around 2010, maybe. There was national attention sort of got to the case because of how ridiculous it was. He was literally asleep a mile and a half away when the robbery occurred. Governor Rick Scott at the time commuted his sentence down to 25 years, and he was eventually released from prison in June 2024 after serving his reduced sentence. And I say 25 years, it probably means he served,
good behavior.
20, 17, whatever it was. So if we take that and apply it to what happened in The Good Place, Pillboy and Jason's robbery occurred in Florida. And if Pillboy was caught, I am confident he would have got a similar sentence. I'm also confident Pillboy wouldn't have garnered national attention in any type of good way. And I'm not getting a sentence commuted like that. I'm going to guess that that's what happened.
No, the most he would have gotten was a Florida man story.
Right. I mean, with a name like Pillboy,
yeah,
he is Florida man. And so I do want to note that Florida's rule is not the same as many states. There are some states that don't have a felony murder rule, Hawaii and Kentucky being 2 of those. There's a few states that have reformed it and made it much more specific to the situations when you can be found guilty of the felony murder rule. Some limit it to the actual perpetrators of the homicide. Some limit it to a specific list of dangerous felonies, like Florida does list it to a bunch of dangerous felonies. Some require the death was foreseeable, which would not have been the case for that guy Ryan, and probably wouldn't have been the case for Pillboy. Well, maybe, given how dumb it was, but yeah. And then some require.
It is fairly foreseeable if you're sealing someone in a safe with no breathing apparatus.
We would have to figure out whether or not it is foreseeable that if you lock your friend in a safe for an extended period of time, whether that would be part of the felony itself.
With a bunch of whippets instead of a breathing apparatus.
But I'm guessing Jason went in by himself. I'm confident Pillboy would be like, no, he went in.
Sure.
He told me to. And there's also some states that require proof of intent to kill. So every state's a little different. What's interesting about it is just that the felony murder rule was sort of designed, it is mostly designed to sort of scare people into not committing felonies.
Sure.
Right? It's the whole reason why we argue why there's the death penalty. It's the reason why they used to do hangings and beheadings and things like that. It is because they want you to think twice about doing it. I am confident if someone is going to go rob a place, they're not thinking about the felony murder rule. Just guessing. committing burglary, I don't think that the felony murder rule will convince people to not do a crime. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. At the same time, to a certain degree, if we're going to have the carceral system that we have now, which is more about like retribution than reform, then it makes a degree of sense to have in a violent crime where maybe or maybe not the person who actually did the killing may themselves be dead. Maybe it's indeterminate who actually did the killing. It's easier to say, well, everyone was involved.
And I agree with that. I just think that the way a lot of felony murder rules are written, that's not what they're going after. Like they tend to go after, and not always, obviously they go after a lot of times the people who are part of the crime, but you find ridiculous scenarios.
Sure.
For instance, funny enough, this is actually a very topical conversation. After I did all of my research, I then caught up on Last Week Tonight, John Oliver's show, and he spent 20 minutes on the felony murder rule about 2 to 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
And funny enough, used Ryan Hole as one of his examples and had a few other examples in there. So apparently I didn't need to do all the research. I should have just watched that damn show and I could have actually told you all the things I just did.
Wow, I'm very behind then on Last Week Tonight. Okay.
But one thing he brought up, which was interesting, was that there are plenty of examples of someone or of like a team of people going in unarmed to do something, and then a cop shoots someone, and that can still apply.
Yeah.
Or another example, I think one of the examples that John Oliver used was that 5 people, went to go burglarize a home, thinking that the person who owned the home wasn't home. He was actually asleep upstairs, grabbed a handgun, shot one of them. That applies too, because it's not necessarily how the killing happens. Killing happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like there are scenarios where it goes too far. Again, I get the purpose of the rule. Whoever is the driving of the getaway car is just as culpable as the people doing it, especially if they are part of the fuller conspiracy. It does go a little too far down the line, especially in like Ryan's case and a few others where I'm like, they tend to admit, I'll do the time for my crime, but I didn't kill anybody, nor was I intending to kill anybody, nor did I even think that that was a possibility. So,
yeah.
Anyway, but let's just be honest. If Pillboy gets caught in the real life in that scenario, he's going away for probably life.
I think that's a safe bet.
Correct. And one last bit of feedback. I'd like to thank Jody, who commented, I believe she commented on Spotify, if I recall correctly. First thing she said, loving the podcast so far. So thank you for that, Jody. She commented on the Minority Report episode. So clearly she's decently far along the podcast, which I like to hear. And she also said, if you want to do some silly psychic police stuff, you guys should really check out Psych, which 100% we're planning to. And for a few others out there who had previously recommended a couple shows, I know a few people recommended Suits, which we did.
Yep.
And that was interesting. And I'm sure we'll do more when we want to hit some low-hanging fruit and try to figure out how many, do some issue spotting in one of their episodes and see how many things that we could come up with. But we did have a couple other recommendations from people over the last year or so. We're going to get through all of them, and we've been sort of focused elsewhere, but I do promise that if you make a recommendation, it's going to make it onto the podcast sooner rather than later. I can pretty much promise you, Jody, that Psych will be happening sometime in the nearish future. Yeah. So,
and speaking of things that'll be happening in the near future, next week we'll be dropping our next episode, and that will be on Spy Game, the Robert Redford, Brad Pitt movie from 2001.
Not to be confused with Spy Kids 1, 2, 3, or however many there were.
Right. Of course not. No one would ever do that.
No. Why would anyone who's the host of a podcast confuse that in any capacity?
Yeah. I have no idea.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb. It's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
We're also introducing on the next episode Jeff's Toy, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the actual episode.
And for that episode, we are bringing on a guest, a mutual friend of mine and Derek, Will Kent, who is former military intelligence. So he brings some expertise to that film. And obviously, we wanted to do that in honor of the late, great Robert Redford. So,
all right. We'll see you guys next week. And happy Thanksgiving again. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Derek.
Over and out. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa PLLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2025, all rights reserved.